one of the best things that I think we've done over the past year is with TYT Investigates and Jonathan Larson, did some really interesting work investigating South Bend, Indiana, and specifically Mayor Pete Buttigieg's, or former Mayor Pete Buttigieg's time there, and the way that the people on the police force were treated, especially the scandal that continues to develop, where a police chief was fired under Buttigieg's tenure. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
TYT Investigates has a major story on the South Bend Police Department and how some in that department appeared to try to influence Pete Buttigieg in firing the black police chief. That's a very interesting story, and you're gonna wanna hear all the details, and some parts of it are deeply problematic. Anna Kasparian has more.
Democratic presidential candidate and South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg has been embroiled in a 7-year controversy involving allegations of racism within the city's police department. His decision to ask the town's first black police chief to step down didn't help. Soon after Buttigieg took office as South Bend mayor in 2012, he attempted to fire the town's first black police chief, Daryl Boykins. Boykins ultimately refused to step down and was later demoted. Now, TYT Investigates has seen previously unreported legal documents detailing secret recordings of South Bend police officers allegedly conspiring to work with Buttigieg's campaign donors to influence him to fire and replace Boykins. One officer is quoted as saying, "It is going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge." How do we know about the tapes? Former South Bend Director of Communications, Karen DePape, heard the recordings and described them in an internal police report back in 2012. Over the previous year, first while dealing with dysfunctional phone system equipment for the police department, DePape came across around a dozen recorded conversations that she said alarmed her. In a deposition later, DePape said she listened to the calls because, quote, "It was something I considered illegal." Buttigieg has refused to release the tapes, arguing that it would violate federal wiretap laws. And Buttigieg has said he does not know what's on the tapes and that he's not sure he can even ask. But these legal documents show that city attorneys acting on his behalf did ask, and the city does know. Because after DePape filed a wrongful termination suit, the city attorneys sent her a list of questions about the tapes. And she answered, describing in detail what she heard in these recordings. TYT Investigates has seen the documents revealing what she heard, and here's what they said. The documents reveal that in February of 2011, 2 white police officers were heard discussing a campaign to get rid of Boykins, with Buttigieg donors acting as go-betweens. In April, the officers say they believe Buttigieg is unaware of the plan and they expect the little effing squirt, as one calls him, to win the mayoral nomination. After he does win, a third officer in June reports hearing directly from Buttigieg that Boykins is done. Some of the officers involved from both the SBPD and the county homicide unit, made up of police from South Bend and its suburbs, were recorded discussing Boykins in racist terms, using Ebonics in reference to him and other black people. 2 black police officers are named as either a target for removal or the subject of racist rhetoric. DePape writes in one of the documents, quote, "I believe that speaking in Ebonics and alluding that chief of police, because he is black, was covering for black gang members to be a racial slur. I believe this because they were talking in Ebonics and it made me believe they wanted to get rid of Boykins because he was black. No comments were made as to him not performing his duties, just that he protects gang members." According to the documents, one of the conversations was between Captain Brian Young and then Lieutenant Dave Wells of the county homicide unit. They were discussing problems with a local gang known as the Cash Out Boys when Lieutenant Wells started speaking in what is termed as Ebonics. Lieutenant Wells in Ebonics stated to the effect, "Ain't nothing gonna get done with the Cash Out Boys, cause Boykins, he take care of his homeboys." Both Wells and Young began to ridicule Boykins and mock him when Wells stated that Corbett had a plan to get rid of him. Commander Tim Corbett ran the county homicide unit. He was Wells's boss. He was also a controversial figure in South Bend and was commonly referred to as Teflon Tim. In 2011, Captain Young fills Wells in on a plan to get rid of Boykins. Here's how the documents describe that call. Young inquired what was the plan, and Wells stated it involved the money people. Young asked Wells, "What do you mean by money people?" Wells stated Hensley and Urbanski, people that are putting money in Buttigieg's campaign. Wells stated Corbett said they are planning to get rid of Boykins and that they had plans to make changes. Both Hensley and Urbanski deny this. Hensley is Sam Hensley, who happened to be the city's streets commissioner under the previous mayor. Bob Urbanski was a city contractor who Corbett had actually done a favor for back in 2006. Urbanski had an issue with a contractor, and Corbett showed up to the contractor's house with his badge and gun to allegedly intimidate the man. The plan didn't end up working, but Urbanski apparently ended up returning the favor to Corbett. According to TYT Investigates, the documents suggest the plan was well underway by April 5th, 2011, 1 month before the primary. Wells and Young discussed Corbett's plan to get rid of Boykins. Later, on April 5th, Young and Wells discussed new details of the plan, expanding its scope beyond just getting rid of Boykins. Now the two target other colleagues to whack. In the legal documents, Karen DePape writes, Lieutenant Wells and Captain Young continue conversations regarding the plan to get rid of Boykins. I believe this conversation also discussed getting rid of Will Johnson, a black investigator, because Boykins put him there. I believe this conversation had to do with Wells and Young making a plan of who they wanted to whack. After Buttigieg had won the primary, the officers begin to discuss who Boykins' replacement should be. Investigative Division Police Chief Steve Richmond and current South Bend Police Chief Scott Ruskowski get mentioned in the tapes as early as June 3rd, 2011. In her deposition, DePape says, quote, Captain Young and Lieutenant Wells discuss their plans when Buttigieg is elected. They state Corbett advised Buttigieg that Boykins is effing worthless. Ruskowski was a captain at the time and apparently suggested that his own boss get the role of police chief. At the time, Buttigieg was apparently considering another officer for the job, and according to what DePape wrote in the documents, Ruskowski wanted to squash that. Young and Wells discussed Ruskowski meeting with Buttigieg to sway him away from Steve Richmond, trying to promote Jeff Walters. Several police calls were made to that effing crew, people with the money, Karen DePape wrote in the documents. Lieutenant Wells stated that several phone calls were made to that effing crew, people with money. The call contained information that Corbett was putting pressure on the people with the money to put influence on Buttigieg to remove Boykins. I believe this may have been the conversation where Wells stated, Tim says it is going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge. According to the legal documents, by June 16th, Buttigieg and Ken Cotter, who's now the prosecutor, have a discussion about Steve Richmond. Then on July 7th, Young and Jim Taylor, who was part of Corbett's homicide unit, talked to Buttigieg about replacing Boykins with Richmond as chief. Asked about conversations with Buttigieg about removing Boykins, Urbanski told TYT, quote, I've got no knowledge on that. In response to a follow-up question, Urbanski said, have a nice day, and hung up. What we do know is that Boykins was eventually asked by Buttigieg to step down. At first, Boykins agreed to do so, and later contested the request by Buttigieg. Boykins was eventually demoted. Buttigieg has changed his story as to why he wanted to fire Boykins. Buttigieg has said that his decision stems from Boykins' handling of these secret recordings, and he alleges that prosecutors warned Boykins could be prosecuted for illegal wiretapping. But The US attorney declined to prosecute Boykins, and no one even said a crime occurred. Buttigieg also claimed that the feds threatened to charge Boykins unless he was let go from the department. But again, no one has said that Boykins committed a crime. Buttigieg later said that he couldn't have Boykins in the police department while he was facing an investigation. But again, Boykins was never charged with anything. In fact, Boykins was asked by prosecutors to hold onto the tapes, which is strange if he were really the subject of a wiretapping investigation. So let's go back to Buttigieg's campaign donors. Exactly how much did Hensley and Urbanski, the so-called people with money, donate to Buttigieg's campaign? Buttigieg's first mayoral campaign disclosures were actually destroyed, and that's legal to do in this local election. But before they were, the South Bend Tribune reported that Urbanski chaired his 2011 campaign and was his biggest donor. Urbanski gave Buttigieg $10,000 in 2010. The report also says Urbanski donated office space to the campaign. According to 2011 first quarter filings obtained by TYT, the office space was worth $1,850 a month and was donated by Urbanski's company, Main Street Row. The value of that donation totaled $7,400 for the first 4 months of 2011. TYT Investigates had to do more digging with Hensley. According to the story, Hensley described himself as a modest donor, giving maybe $100 or $200. The 2011 first quarter filings show just a $50 donation from Hensley and an in-kind donation valued at $44.30 connected to an event on March 25th. But what about other forms of campaign contributions? According to TYT Investigates, asked whether the in-kind donation indicated his participation in a fundraiser for Buttigieg, Hensley said he, quote, never had a fundraiser for him, never. A flyer from the campaign, however, shows Hensley and Urbanski co-hosting a $125 per person fundraiser for Buttigieg at Urbanski's home on April 13th. Both donors deny having police department personnel discussions with Buttigieg. Buttigieg's campaign national press secretary, Chris Mager, asked to see the documents that TYT Investigates has seen, arguing that, quote, you're more than willing to report rumors you're unable to prove, so it'd be nice to see some of this. He provided no further comment to TYT Investigates.
All right, well, now you've seen some of what we have, and it's up on tyt.com, and you could all read it for yourselves. Look, let's give a little perspective and context now. So, are any of these reports or documents charging that Buttigieg knew of the entire plan and was complicit in it? No, not as far as we can tell. Now, there is that part about where one of the officers claimed that they heard it from Buttigieg himself that Boykins was done. But even that doesn't indicate that he was part of the plan in the first place. And they call him, the officers apparently call him a little squirt in this regard. And they seem to want to influence him, not directly, but through his money people, Urbanski and the others. So on the other hand, to me, what is most interesting is not necessarily even about Buttigieg, but about how our system works in this country. The two parts are, one, how you influence the money people in order to get the results. And in this case, the results are clear. No matter who knew what part of the plan, unfortunately, the black police chief was originally fired, then demoted. When the African American community said, wait, why are you firing this police chief who hasn't done anything wrong? And so, but it's not just that. There were 3 officers, black officers, that were mentioned in the tapes. None of them ever got promotions in the time since the tapes. And only one of them remains on the force today. Even worse, when Buttigieg started, there was 29 black cops in South Bend. Now there's only 15. Now, it could be a coincidence that, hey, they moved out of town, there was really things that were wrong with them. You could go on and on, but that is not a good record. And now 26% of South Bend is African American. The police force now is down to 6% African American. And so whether Buttigieg knew any of that the machinations of his money people and whether the cops were right about his money people, the results seem to be the black officers were moved out of the South Bend Police Department exactly as the police seem to be, the white officers seem to have plotted, according to the documents. So that is damning. And then, so that's the role of money. And that's all across the country in huge presidential and national elections, and also in small elections in your neck of the woods. Now, the second part that's damning about America overall is, my God, how racism is so deeply rooted. So according to the documents, the person who listened to the tapes wrote down that Corbett also called black gang members little apes. And then there's the line, of course, of it's going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge. And as it turned out, white people were back in charge. And so to see them talking in a way that is mocking of their police chief, even though he's their chief, but he's black, and how they pretend that he's on the side of the gang members, again, with no evidence at all as far as we can tell from these documents, just, well, he's black and they're black. And how they plot against them. In this case, these allegations are not innuendo, not stereotypes, not something in the back of your head. No, this is something very much in the front of their heads, and it's a plot that they seem to have, according to the documents, enacted. And if all of it is correct, certainly successfully so. And so not only do African Americans in this country have to deal with this if they're regular citizens, they also have to deal with it if they're officials. And some of the things that they deal with are stereotypes, and others are active plots against them. So my God, if you didn't know before, well, certainly this gives you a little view into what happens all across. You think this is just South Bend? Of course this isn't just South Bend. Some variations of this, unfortunately, probably happen all across the country. South Bend is the one we happen to know about because Pete Buttigieg ran for president. So a little investigation into this produced all of these results. And so what could you find in your hometown if we had real reporters looking into all the different parts of the government?
Not good.
Yeah. So look, in terms of what Buttigieg knew and when he knew it, that should be the focus of a lot of reporters' attentions if they cared to cover his campaign thoroughly. And those are very fair questions. For him to throw his hands up and go, I don't know, the black police chief just happened to get fired and demoted, and half the black police officers are no longer on the job. It's all a coincidence and has nothing to do with me. Okay, that's a case he could make, but certainly one that he'd have to explain a little bit better. And right now, what we have is a lot of questions, and the results are not good. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.